Greetings and salutations everyone, this is one and only JRPG here, and today I'm delighted to review Crisis Core Reunion for PC. Now let's flesh out exactly what is this game about. So Crisis Core Reunion is basically a prequel story to Final Fantasy VII, exploring the backstory of our main character, Zack Fair, but also focusing on some of the side characters like Sephiroth and Cloud, so we get to know like what were these characters exactly alike before the events of the main game. There's also a bunch of new characters which are exclusive to this game, and some of them do actually appear on some of the other sequels as well. And there's obviously a bunch of OG characters which do make cameos, very brief ones, in this game. Now let's talk about a bit of the Reunion port here. So for the PC version, you actually have the ability to play this game on 120 FPS. This makes the gameplay experience very smooth. It feels like almost a modern game for the most part. Obviously, some things in the actual level design and things like that, you can definitely feel like this was built on top of the old game. And on top of that, you also have now the ability to play the game in both Japanese and the English audios. The soundtrack has been newly arranged. Also, all the dialogue inside the game is now voiced for all the characters, and the combat has gone a massive overhaul, which is probably the biggest thing about the Reunion version. Now let's kind of tackle a bit of that combat. So the combat previously was quite like what we had in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, where it didn't feel like very fluid, it was a bit clunky, and it was very limited to the technology that existed back then. It just wasn't very super smooth experience that we kind of see in, for example, in Kingdom Hearts 3 and like with, Fantasy VII Remake. So the combat does feel a lot more modern, it's faster, it's smoother, because you had like this separate like attack action, and like smashing that didn't feel like you were actually comboing. It feels like very isolated attack, and here like when you attack it feels like you are actually comboing your movements. And then you obviously have things like block and dodge roll, which are obviously also a big part about it. And there's been a lot of other improvements to the actual combat. So you have the UI system, which has been significantly improved. So there are a lot of cutscenes for the limit breaks and the summons inside the game. So those have now a skip button, which is very nice. That makes the game go a lot more faster, because not only the old game had a lower FPS and the combat was kind of slowish, but you also didn't have the ability to skip these cutscenes or the loading screens and things like that. And that's why the game does feel actually quite a lot faster than the original game on PSP. But I have to say the combat is like very balanced in a lot of ways. Like, yes, you're able to spam abilities, but there are a lot of limitations to it. And then you had the DMW, which is basically DMW, sorry. And that's basically a system which allows you to use these bonuses, limit breaks, and summons, which is kind of like rooted into some RNG stuff, which may not be, something that you prefer in any type of game, to be honest, in the modern day. But fundamentally, like, it's a system that has been improved quite a lot from the original PSP version. Now, in terms of the game itself, it's quite linear. I mean, it consists of 11 episodes, which, move the story by hinge, basically. And while you are between these missions, you sometimes have the ability to explore Midgar and go to these side missions. And these side missions are basically, just monster slaying quests, and each of them are slightly different. Like, you have to move through a small dungeon first in order to meet the actual monster. Sometimes you have to collect chests too, and things like that. And this used to be extremely boring on the original game. I think now with all of these enhanced loading times and higher FPS and faster combat, it does feel a lot more ideal to grind out these missions. I believe there's over 300 missions inside the game, and you get to unlock them as you complete the old ones, and also talking to NPCs in different locations in the game. And for the most part, the game is around 11 to 12 hours long, and only by doing side missions you can add like maybe a couple of extra 4 to 5 hours to the game, because there's not exactly like this a side dungeon into the game, which well, there's a kind of like a side dungeon in the last mission, but fundamentally like all the side content and the end game content is on those side missions, and they are not like story wise and explorer wise like the most ideal thing, I guess, but there's also a bit of lore actually in the side missions, because in some of them actually Yuffie appears and you get to like see a lot of dialogue between her, not like very important to Yuffie's character, and she's quite different in this iteration now that I actually played the intermission not too long ago. But yeah, if you want to really squeeze out love from the game, I definitely recommend doing those side missions. There is a new game plus though as well, so there's that too as an option, and obviously you can always increase the difficulty, but you know, it's really up to the people, like what do they want from the game. I mean, it's still like a AAA price for this game, and that can be a very steep for a lot of people for that amount of hours. Actually it's 50 euros, but 70 for the digital deluxe. But yeah, I mean, because the original game was probably 20 to 25 hours long due to not being able to skip off anything in the battle, so the game was significantly longer. But due to all these quality of life adjustments, the game actually plays out faster. Now, there's also a materia system inside the game, so you're able to fuse materias between each other, so sometimes you can, you know, fuse your fire with this spell or something and get Fira. You can get also Firaga and etc. And you can also get like passive bonuses to these magics and materia in general, which like increase your base statistics like HP, mana, vitality, spirit, etc. And there's a bit of a customization there, and you get a lot of these from the side missions, for example, so that allows you to get into the customization. And then there's obviously materia that you can buy from shops as well, and I think the materia system is actually pretty good. I had my reservations about the system that we had in the new Final Fantasy VII. I wasn't like totally 100% bored with it, but I think this one is actually pretty good. There's also accessories where you can equip different items. I think there's 4 slots. I don't know how you actually unlock the remaining 2, because you start out with 2, but you can get up to 4. There is no mini games exactly in the game. I mean, a couple of missions you do something else than slaying monsters and bosses. Like there's a stealth mission that was actually absolutely horribly designed, and I hated that absolutely. Then there's this sniper thing, and I guess the game developers really just wanted to bring a bit more of variety to the game, because for the most part, this is a very combat-heavy game outside from the dialogue and the cutscenes. Like, it's combat, 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 and the side missions are all combat too. So, I guess I understand why they wanted to add these minigames, although kind of bad. And that's just kind of like old JRPG stuff. I mean, there's no puzzles in the game at least, but even those might have been actually better than some of these things. Now, when it comes to the audio, I think, you know, as I said already, you can play it on Japanese and English audios, and these are with the new voice casts from the remake, so that's something that they really emphasized here, that no, this is not a remaster of the OG voices, these are the new cast. And there has been a lot of critique of Zack's voice actor in English version, and I understand that. In the beginning, I was like, okay, this is not good, but after you get like a couple of missions through, he actually gets a lot better. So I think there's a couple of hiccups in the beginning, and maybe it's just me getting normalized with the voice and, you know, eventually get along with it. But I didn't really find any problems outside from a couple of early beginning dialogues with him. So I don't know in which order that they recorded them, but I assume from the beginning to end. And that's the reason why it sounded a bit weird in the beginning. But if you don't like that at all, you have the Japanese audio as an option. Now, when it comes to the soundtrack rearrangement, historically, guys, always, even in spin-off Final Fantasies like Crystal Chronicles or 13-2 or 10-2, you always had great OSTs, okay? Like, even if those games were kind of garbage or shit or below the Final Fantasy level, spin-offs usually had great soundtracks. But I have to say, Nobuo Uematsu really underperformed here, or maybe he didn't really care about the spin-off project to begin with, but this was not a very good soundtrack. I didn't really feel inspired by the title track or anything, and the best tracks that are inside the game are from the, you know, Final Fantasy VII, you know, so it was not really, I was not really impressed with this soundtrack at all, which was, you know, fairly disappointing. And lastly, we're going to be talking about a bit of the story, and there will be some minor spoilers included here, so you have been warned. Now, the plot exactly isn't the strong suit of Reunion. In grand scheme of things, it doesn't give like this massive insight to the story of Final Fantasy VII or its characters, and yeah, we do get a bit of an insight into Sephiroth. What was he like before he went full-on mad? And we also get a bit of a build-up for the romantic relationship between Zack and Aerith, which may have a lot of significance in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for instance. And then there's obviously the villain, Genesis, which has a kind of like a cool design. I really liked his look, but most of his dialogue is really repeating the same passages from the Loveless novel and never speaking quite directly to any character inside the game. Like, he has this very cryptic, style of talking in third person, or I guess citing these Loveless parts. And I think in a lot of ways there could have been a lot more fleshing out what type of childhood Genesis had, and yeah, they do that a bit, but I think there could have been a lot more, and maybe perhaps making a bit more solid case for what Genesis is actually doing and why exactly did he kill his village and why did his parents betray him and all these things. Like, some of that stuff just fundamentally, in my opinion, left kind of unanswered. But I mean, the story or the plot in this game is not like bad, it's just average, and I think there were a lot of missed opportunities here. Like, one of the things I was expecting here was a new secret ending related to Rebirth and Remake, and I was also hoping maybe there could have been like some type of a mention out of Roche inside the game, or in a text file. He didn't need to appear in the game, but some hint that this guy was training to be a soldier, because he just popped out of nowhere in Remake. But Reunion is a solid game. There is an argument to be made, is it good bang for the buck? And yeah, I mean, people who are very big Final Fantasy VII fans want to learn more about some of these characters in its universe, and who knows, some of these characters might make appearances and cameos in Rebirth and the third installation in the Final Fantasy VII reboot, which could play a lot more significance of playing Reunion. And I mean, it's not a mistake or a coincidence that this game was released between Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth. There is some type of message that is being levied out here, and I think we're going to be seeing that next year. What is that going to be? But I think this is not a coincidence, so in that sense, yeah, I think the game is worth playing, or at least watching a playthrough or something. But yeah, and also the last point, I wish that they maybe had added bit more extra content, like some couple of new side bosses or something, and who knows, they might actually do some DLC, but we will see. Thanks for watching, guys. Check out my other Final Fantasy reviews on the channel and other JRPG stuff. I will be seeing you in next video. Cheers.